I never imagined that being called worthless would lead me to discovering I owned everything around me. One moment I was scrubbing floors in a mansion, being humiliated by a spoiled heiress. The next, a mysterious billionaire appeared and said 4 words that changed my life forever. She owns everything here. This is my story. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Elena, and 8 months ago, I was just another invisible maid trying to survive in a world that seemed designed to keep people like me down. You know how they say hard work pays off? Well, nobody tells you that sometimes you can work yourself to the bone and still barely have enough to eat. That was my reality working at the Blackwood Estate, one of the most prestigious mansions in the city. I had been working there for 3 years, ever since my mother passed away from cancer. The medical bills had wiped out everything we had saved, and I was left with nothing but debt and determination. The Blackwood family paid decent wages for domestic help, but it wasn't easy money. Mrs. Victoria Blackwood, the matriarch of the family, was demanding but fair. Her daughter Isabella, however, was a completely different story. Isabella Blackwood was 25 years old, beautiful in that polished, expensive way that money can buy, and absolutely convinced that the world revolved around her trust fund. She had never worked a day in her life, never faced real hardship, and treated the staff like we were furniture that occasionally needed to be yelled at. Every day brought some new humiliation, some fresh reminder that in her eyes, I was less than human. The morning that changed everything started like any other. I woke up at 5 in the morning in my tiny apartment across town, the same cramped studio I had shared with my mother during her final months. The walls were thin, the heater barely worked, and the neighbors upstairs seemed to think midnight was the perfect time for tap dancing lessons. But it was mine, and after growing up in foster care, having my own space meant everything to me. I caught the early bus to the wealthy Riverside district, watching the city transform as we moved from my neighborhood of corner stores and food trucks to tree-lined streets with gates and security systems. The contrast never failed to amaze me. Here I was, traveling between 2 completely different worlds every single day, invisible in both. The Blackwood Estate sat on 5 acres of perfectly manicured grounds. The mansion itself was a masterpiece of classical architecture, with marble columns, crystal chandeliers, and rooms that were bigger than most people's entire homes. I had been inside every inch of that house, cleaning and maintaining it, but I never forgot that I was just passing through someone else's dream. That Tuesday morning, Mrs. Blackwood had left early for a charity board meeting, leaving Isabella in charge of the household. This was always a recipe for disaster. Without her mother's watchful eye, Isabella became even more demanding and cruel. She seemed to take genuine pleasure in finding fault with everything the staff did, as if our mistakes somehow validated her superiority. I was in the main parlor, carefully dusting the antique furniture and priceless artwork that decorated the room. The Blackwoods collected art like some people collect stamps, and every piece was worth more than I would make in several years. I moved slowly and methodically, the way Mrs. Blackwood had taught me during my first week. "Respect the history in these pieces, Elena," she had said. "They've survived longer than any of us will." The morning sun streamed through the tall windows, casting everything in a golden glow that made even the dust motes look magical. For a moment, I allowed myself to imagine what it would be like to live in such beauty every day, to wake up in silk sheets instead of secondhand cotton, to never worry about whether there would be enough money for groceries and rent. That's when Isabella came sweeping into the room like a storm in designer heels. She was wearing a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than my monthly salary, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite the early hour. Everything about her screamed wealth and privilege, from her manicured nails to the diamond tennis bracelet that caught the light as she moved. "Elena!" she snapped, her voice sharp with annoyance. "What are you doing in here? I specifically told you to clean the guest bedrooms first thing this morning." I looked up from the antique end table I was polishing, confused. "Ma'am, you told me to start with the parlor because your mother's book club is meeting here this afternoon." I wrote it down to make sure I remembered correctly. Isabella's face flushed with anger. She hated being contradicted, even when she was wrong. "Don't you dare tell me what I said. I know exactly what instructions I gave you, and it wasn't to waste time playing with expensive furniture you could never afford." Her words stung, but I had learned to keep my emotions in check. Reacting to Isabella's cruelty only made things worse. "Of course, Miss Blackwood. I'll move to the guest rooms right away." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. But as I gathered my cleaning supplies to leave, Isabella wasn't finished with me. "Actually, no. Stay right there. I want to have a little chat with you about your attitude lately." My heart sank. Isabella's chats were never actually conversations. They were one-sided lectures designed to remind me of my place in her world, which was somewhere between the furniture and the houseplants. "I've been watching you, Elena, and I don't like what I see. You walk around this house like you belong here, like you're somehow equal to the family that employs you. Let me remind you of something." She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that was somehow more menacing than shouting. "You are here because we allow you to be here. You clean our mess because that's all you're qualified to do. Don't ever forget that you are nothing more than hired help." I stood there silently, my hands gripping the cleaning cloth so tightly my knuckles turned white. Every word felt like a physical blow, designed to tear down whatever self-respect I had managed to build up. But I needed this job. I needed the steady paycheck and the health insurance that came with it, so I swallowed my pride and nodded. "Yes, Miss Blackwood, I understand." "Do you?" she asked, circling me like a predator sizing up its prey. "Because sometimes I wonder if you really grasp how replaceable you are. There are dozens of girls just like you who would love to have this job. Girls who know how to show proper respect to their betters." The way she emphasized betters made my skin crawl. It was a reminder that in her world, worth was measured by bank account balances and family names, not by character or hard work. "I'm grateful for this opportunity," I managed to say, hating how small my voice sounded. Isabella smiled, but there was no warmth in it. It was the smile of someone who enjoyed having power over others. "Good. I'm glad we understand each other. Now, since you seem to have forgotten your duties, let me give you a little reminder of what your job actually entails." She walked over to the coffee table, where I had just finished arranging fresh flowers that morning. With one swift motion, she swept the entire vase onto the floor. Water and glass exploded across the marble, and the beautiful white lilies scattered among the debris like fallen snow. "Oops," she said with mock innocence. "Looks like someone made a mess. Better clean that up before it stains the marble." I stared at the destruction, feeling something break inside me that had nothing to do with the shattered vase. This wasn't about cleaning or job performance. This was about cruelty for its own sake, about someone using their power to humiliate another human being simply because they could. But I knelt down anyway and began picking up the pieces of glass, careful not to cut myself on the sharp edges. "That's better," Isabella said, watching me with satisfaction. "This is where you belong, Elena. On your knees, cleaning up after your betters. Don't ever forget it." As I worked, I could hear her heels clicking against the marble as she paced around me, like she was admiring her handiwork. The sound echoed through the room, a constant reminder of her presence and my humiliation. Just then, voices could be heard approaching from the front hallway. Isabella's entire demeanor changed instantly. The cruel smile disappeared, replaced by the polished mask she wore in public. "Oh, that must be Mother's guests arriving early for the planning committee meeting," she said in a completely different tone, as if the past 10 minutes had never happened. I looked up in confusion. "But you said the book club wasn't until this afternoon." Isabella's eyes flashed with irritation at being caught in her lie. "Plans change, Elena. Surely someone of your limited intelligence can understand that." She smoothed down her dress and checked her reflection in the mirror above the fireplace. "Now hurry up and clean this mess before they come in here, and try not to embarrass the family any more than you already have." The voices in the hallway grew louder, and I could make out Mrs. Blackwood's cultured tones mixed with several others I didn't recognize. My hands moved faster, desperate to clear away the evidence of Isabella's cruelty before her mother's guests could witness my humiliation. The last thing I wanted was to cause problems for Mrs. Blackwood, who had always treated me with kindness and respect. But Isabella had other plans. As the footsteps approached the parlor, she raised her voice deliberately. "Elena, I can't believe you would be so clumsy. That vase was worth more than you make in 6 months. Mother is going to be furious when she finds out what you've done." I looked up at her in shock, realizing what she was doing. She was going to blame me for the mess she had created, make me the villain in front of her mother's important guests. "Miss Blackwood, you know that's not what happened," I said quietly, still on my knees among the broken glass. Isabella's face twisted with fake concern and very real malice. "Are you seriously going to lie about this? In front of witnesses? I saw you knock over that vase with my own eyes. Now you're trying to blame me for your clumsiness?" The parlor doors opened, and Mrs. Blackwood entered with 3 elegantly dressed women who were clearly members of high society. Their conversation stopped abruptly when they saw the scene before them. Isabella standing over me in my cleaning uniform, surrounded by broken glass and water, looking every inch the victim of someone else's incompetence. "Isabella, dear, what on earth happened here?" Mrs. Blackwood asked, her eyes taking in the destruction with obvious dismay. Before I could say anything, Isabella launched into her performance. "Oh, Mother, I'm so sorry. I was just checking on Elena's progress when she accidentally knocked over the Waterford crystal vase. I've been trying to help her clean it up, but I think some of the pieces might be beyond repair." One of the guests, a silver-haired woman wearing pearls that probably cost more than my car, clicked her tongue disapprovingly. "These people never learn to be careful around nice things," she said, looking at me like I was something unpleasant she had stepped in. In my day, domestic help knew their place and respected their employers' property. I felt heat rise in my cheeks, but I kept my eyes focused on the floor. There was no point in defending myself. Who would believe the word of a maid over that of the family's daughter? In their world, I was already guilty, simply by virtue of my position. My silence only seemed to confirm their assumptions about my guilt and my character. "I'll take care of the replacement cost, Mrs. Blackwood," I said quietly, though I had no idea how I would possibly afford to replace a piece of Waterford crystal. Mrs. Blackwood looked troubled, glancing between her daughter and me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "We'll discuss this later, Elena. For now, please finish cleaning this up and then take care of the guest rooms." As I continued gathering the pieces of broken glass, the women moved to the other side of the room to begin their meeting. But I could hear every word of their conversation, and it was all about me. "Victoria, I really think you're too lenient with your staff," one of them was saying. "In my house, someone would be terminated immediately for such carelessness." Another voice chimed in. "These people need firm boundaries, or they start thinking they can take liberties. It's for their own good, really." Isabella's voice was sugar-sweet as she added, "I've been telling Mother that Elena has been getting a bit too comfortable lately. Perhaps this incident is a wake-up call that some changes need to be made." Every word felt like a knife twisting in my chest. These women didn't know me, had never seen my work ethic or my dedication to the family I served. They saw only what they expected to see, a clumsy servant who didn't know her place. And Isabella was using their prejudices to destroy my reputation and possibly my livelihood. As I finally finished cleaning up the last of the glass and water, I could feel all eyes on me. The weight of their judgment was suffocating, making it hard to breathe. I stood up slowly, my knees aching from kneeling on the hard marble floor, and gathered my cleaning supplies with as much dignity as I could manage. "Elena," Isabella's voice stopped me as I headed toward the door. "Before you go, why don't you apologize to Mother's guests for disrupting their meeting with your clumsiness?" The request was designed to maximize my humiliation, to force me to accept blame for something I hadn't done in front of strangers who would remember me only as the incompetent maid who broke expensive things. I turned around slowly, my heart pounding so hard I was sure everyone in the room could hear it. The 4 women were all looking at me expectantly, waiting for my apology, my acknowledgement of fault, my acceptance of their judgment. This was the moment that would define not just my job, but my sense of self-worth. But before I could speak, before I could force out the words that would save my job but destroy my soul, the parlor doors opened once again. And everything changed. A tall, distinguished man stepped into the parlor with the kind of presence that immediately commanded attention. He was probably in his early 60s, with silver hair and sharp blue eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. His suit was perfectly tailored, and there was something about the way he carried himself that spoke of real power and influence. But what struck me most was the kindness in his expression as his gaze fell on me kneeling among the broken glass. "I apologize for the interruption," he said in a warm, cultured voice. "I'm Alexander Sterling. I was hoping to speak with Mrs. Blackwood about the hospital foundation, but it seems I've arrived at an inopportune moment." The name Sterling hit the room like a lightning bolt. I could see the recognition dawn on everyone's faces. Alexander Sterling was one of the most powerful philanthropists in the country, a tech mogul whose foundation had donated billions to causes around the world. Mrs. Blackwood immediately stood up, her face lighting up with genuine pleasure. "Mr. Sterling, what an unexpected honor. Please, come in." We were just finishing up some household matters. But Alexander's attention wasn't on the elegant women in their designer clothes. His eyes were fixed on me, still holding the dustpan full of broken glass, my uniform wrinkled and stained from cleaning. "I couldn't help but overhear some of the conversation," he said carefully. "It sounded like there was some confusion about what happened here." Isabella stepped forward quickly, her voice taking on that saccharine tone she used when she wanted to impress important people. "Oh, it's nothing serious, Mr. Sterling. Just a small accident with one of our staff members. These things happen when people aren't careful around valuable items." Alexander's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes grew colder. "I see. And you witnessed this accident personally, Miss Blackwood?" "Isabella Blackwood." "And yes, I saw the whole thing. Elena here knocked over a priceless vase while she was supposed to be dusting. We're just trying to figure out how to handle the situation appropriately." The way she said appropriately made it clear she was angling for my termination. Alexander nodded slowly, then did something completely unexpected. He walked directly over to me, extending his hand to help me stand up. "Elena, isn't it? I'm Alexander Sterling. It's a pleasure to meet you." I stared at his outstretched hand in shock. In all my years working in wealthy households, no employer's guest had ever offered to help me up, let alone introduce themselves to me like I was an equal. Hesitantly, I took his hand and allowed him to help me to my feet. His grip was firm and warm, and there was genuine respect in the gesture. "Mr. Sterling," Isabella interrupted, clearly uncomfortable with the attention he was paying to me. "I assure you this really isn't necessary. Elena understands that accidents have consequences, and we're handling it internally." Alexander turned to look at Isabella with an expression that was polite but somehow penetrating. "Of course. I just find it interesting that someone would be so careless around such beautiful things. Tell me, Elena, how long have you been working for the Blackwood family?" "3 years, sir," I managed to say, still confused by his unexpected kindness. Alexander smiled encouragingly. 3 years. That's quite a long time to maintain a position in a household like this. I imagine you've been trusted with much more valuable items than a single vase during that time." I nodded, not sure where he was going with this line of questioning. "In fact," Alexander continued, his voice taking on a thoughtful tone, "I remember Mrs. Blackwood mentioning at last year's charity gala how impressed she was with her head housekeeper. Someone who had never broken anything, never made a serious mistake, and who went above and beyond in caring for the family's belongings. That was you, wasn't it, Elena?" Mrs. Blackwood looked surprised but nodded. "Yes, Elena has been exemplary in her service. She's one of the most careful and dedicated staff members we've ever employed." I could see Isabella's face starting to flush with anger, as the narrative she had carefully constructed began to unravel. Alexander's smile grew wider. "How fascinating. So we have someone with a 3-year track record of perfect care suddenly becoming careless enough to knock over a valuable vase. That seems rather out of character, doesn't it?" The room had grown uncomfortably quiet. The other women were looking between Isabella and Alexander with obvious confusion. "People make mistakes," Isabella said defensively, but her voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. Alexander nodded agreeably. "They certainly do. For instance, someone might mistakenly think they could lie to me about what really happened here." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. "I beg your pardon?" Isabella's voice was tight with barely controlled anger. Alexander reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. "You see, I've been standing outside those windows for the past 10 minutes. taking a call from my assistant about the hospital foundation meeting. I saw everything that happened in this room. The blood drained from Isabella's face as the full implications of his words sank in. I watched you deliberately sweep that vase onto the floor. I saw you force Elena to clean it up while you humiliated her. And I just listened to you lie about it to your mother and her guests, trying to get an innocent woman fired for your own cruel amusement. The silence in the room was deafening. Mrs. Blackwood looked like she had been slapped, her face a mixture of shock and horror as she turned to look at her daughter. "Isabella," she said in a voice I had never heard her use before, low and dangerous. "Please tell me Mr. Sterling is mistaken." But Isabella's guilt was written all over her face. She opened and closed her mouth several times, but no words came out. The perfect mask she had worn her entire life was finally slipping, revealing the ugly truth underneath. Alexander wasn't finished, but that's not even the most interesting part of this story, he continued, his voice taking on an almost conversational tone. The really fascinating part is what Elena doesn't know about herself. Everyone in the room turned to look at me, including me looking confused and worried. What could he possibly mean? "Elena, what was your mother's maiden name?" Alexander asked gently. "Rodriguez." I answered automatically, not understanding why that would matter. Alexander nodded. "And her first name was Maria Rodriguez, wasn't it? Before she married your father, James Martinez." I felt a chill run down my spine. How did this stranger know so much about my family? "Elena, your mother didn't just clean houses to pay for her medical bills. Before she got sick, she was a successful artist and philanthropist in her own right. She also inherited a significant trust fund from her grandmother, Elena Rodriguez Sterling." The name hit me like a physical blow, Sterling. The same name as the man standing in front of me. "Maria was my cousin," Alexander said softly. "Your mother was family, Elena, and that makes you family too." The room started spinning around me. This couldn't be real. My mother had never mentioned any wealthy relatives, any inheritance, any connection to one of the most powerful families in the country. "That's impossible," I whispered. "My mother never said anything about." Alexander's expression grew sad. "Your mother was a proud woman. When she married your father, her family disapproved because they thought he wasn't good enough for her. There was a falling out, and Maria chose love over money. She walked away from everything to build a life with the man she loved." Tears started forming in my eyes as pieces of my childhood began to make sense. The way my mother sometimes looked sad when she talked about her family. The elegant handwriting I had inherited from her. The way she could create beauty out of nothing. Whether it was a simple flower arrangement or a painting done with discount art supplies. "When she got sick," Alexander continued, "she was too proud to reach out for help. She thought we would judge her for the choices she had made. By the time I found out what was happening, it was too late. I've been looking for you ever since, Elena. I've been trying to find the daughter of the cousin I should have protected." Mrs. Blackwood was staring at me like she was seeing me for the first time. "Elena, is this true? Are you really?" "She's Maria Rodriguez Sterling's daughter," Alexander confirmed, "which means she's the sole heir to a trust fund worth approximately $50 million. But more importantly, she owns controlling interest in Sterling Holdings, which includes the property management company that owns this estate." The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Isabella looked like she was going to be sick. The other women were staring at me with a mixture of shock and embarrassment, probably remembering every condescending comment they had made about people like me. "Elena," Alexander said gently, "you don't just work in this house. You own it. You own the entire estate, the company that manages it, and several other properties throughout the city. You've been cleaning your own house for 3 years while Isabella here has been treating you like a servant." I felt like I was in a dream, or maybe a nightmare. This couldn't be real. People like me didn't suddenly discover they were millionaires. We worked double shifts and worried about rent and ate ramen noodles for dinner because it was all we could afford. "I don't understand," I said, my voice barely audible. "If this is true, why didn't anyone tell me?" Why did my mother let me struggle all these years? Alexander's expression grew even more gentle. Because, Elena, your mother left very specific instructions. The inheritance was only to be released to you when you turned 25, or when you proved yourself ready for the responsibility through your actions and character. He gestured around the room. You've spent 3 years working in conditions that would have broken most people. You've been treated poorly, paid barely enough to survive, and yet you never complained. You never stole, never showed disrespect, never let the cruelty you faced turn you cruel in return. Your mother wanted to make sure that when you inherited this wealth, you would use it wisely and with compassion. Isabella suddenly found her voice. This is ridiculous. Elena is just a maid. Look at her. She's nobody special. She cleans toilets for a living. The venom in her voice was shocking, even for her. But Alexander just smiled sadly. You're right about one thing, Isabella. Elena is nobody special. She's extraordinary. He turned back to me. Elena, you have a choice to make right now. You can walk away from all of this. You can keep the life you've built for yourself, continue working as you have been, and forget this conversation ever happened. The money will sit in trust forever, and nothing will change. Or you can accept your inheritance and use it to make a difference in the world. You can honor your mother's memory by being the kind of person she raised you to be, just with the resources to help on a scale she never could. I looked around the room at the faces staring at me. Mrs. Blackwood looked stunned, but somehow proud. The other women seemed unable to process what they were hearing. And Isabella looked like her entire world was crashing down around her. If I accept, I said slowly, what happens to the Blackwood family? This is their home. Alexander shook his head. No, Elena, this was never their home. They've been tenants, paying rent to the property management company that you now own. Very reasonable rent, I might add. Thanks to your mother's instructions to take care of families in need. The irony was overwhelming. The Blackwood family, who had always seemed so wealthy and powerful, had been living in my house all along. Isabella, who had spent years making me feel small and worthless, had been paying rent to the very person she was tormenting. There's something else, Alexander continued. The hospital where your mother received treatment, St. Mary's? Your trust fund has been anonymously paying for the free clinic there for the past 5 years. Every patient who couldn't afford care, every life that was saved, that was your mother's legacy, and now it's yours to continue. I thought about all the nights I'd sat by my mother's bedside in that hospital, holding her hand while she fought a battle she couldn't win. I thought about the doctors and nurses who had cared for her with such dedication, never knowing that the family they were helping was actually funding the very program that made their compassion possible. I accept, I said quietly, my voice growing stronger with each word. I accept the inheritance, and I accept the responsibility that comes with it. Quote, Alexander smiled, and for the first time since this surreal conversation began, I felt like I might actually be able to handle whatever came next. Isabella's face had gone from pale to bright red. This is insane. You can't just give everything to the maid. She doesn't know how to handle that kind of money. She'll waste it all within a year. Her desperation was showing, the carefully constructed facade of superiority finally cracking completely. Alexander looked at Isabella with an expression of profound disappointment. Isabella, you've just proven exactly why Elena deserves this inheritance, and you don't. Even faced with your own terrible behavior, your first thought isn't remorse or self-reflection. It's anger that someone you consider beneath you might have something you want. Mrs. Blackwood finally found her voice. Elena, I am so deeply sorry. If I had known who you were, how my daughter was treating you. I held up a hand to stop her. Mrs. Blackwood, you've always been kind to me. You treated me with respect and dignity, even when you thought I was just your employee. That says everything about your character. Then I turned to Isabella. As for you, Isabella, you're fired. The words felt strange coming out of my mouth, but also oddly liberating. You're no longer welcome in this house. You have 24 hours to pack your belongings and find somewhere else to live. Isabella's mouth fell open. You can't do this. This is my home. I've lived here my entire life. No, I said firmly, feeling strength I didn't know I possessed. You've been a guest here your entire life. A guest who abused the hospitality and kindness of others. That ends now. Alexander stepped forward. However, I don't think Elena is quite finished yet. Are you, Elena? I looked at him, not sure what he meant. But as I thought about everything that had just happened, everything I had just learned, I realized he was right. I wasn't finished. Isabella, you're going to take the $50,000 from your trust fund, and you're going to donate it to the free clinic at St. Mary's Hospital. You're also going to spend the next year volunteering there, learning what it means to actually help people, instead of just taking from them. Isabella looked like she was about to explode. I won't do it! You can't make me! I smiled, feeling more confident than I had in years. Actually, I can. Because if you don't, I'll make sure that every household in this city knows exactly what kind of person you really are. No one will hire you, no one will associate with you, and you'll find out what it's really like to struggle for once in your privileged life. The threat wasn't empty, and Isabella knew it. With the resources I now had access to, I could indeed make her life very difficult if I chose to. But more than that, the truth of what she had done was already spreading through the room. Mrs. Blackwood's friends had heard everything, and news like this traveled fast in high society circles. Fine, Isabella said through gritted teeth. But don't think this changes anything. You're still just a maid playing dress-up with money you don't deserve. I walked over to her close enough that only she could hear my next words. Isabella, I've learned something important today. True worth isn't measured by bank accounts or family names. It's measured by how you treat people when you think no one is watching. And by that measure, you're the poorest person in this room. As Isabella stormed out of the parlor, probably to pack her things and plan her revenge, Alexander turned to me with a warm smile. Elena, there's a board meeting tomorrow morning for Sterling Holdings. As the majority shareholder, you'll need to be there. Are you ready to start learning how to manage your inheritance? I thought about my mother, about the sacrifices she had made and the lessons she had taught me. I thought about all the people who could be helped with the resources I now controlled. And I thought about the little girl who had grown up in foster care, never imagining that someday she would have the power to make a real difference in the world. Yes, I said with certainty, I'm ready. The next morning, I walked into the Sterling Holdings boardroom, wearing a new suit Alexander had helped me pick out. But more importantly, I walked in with a new sense of purpose and confidence. I wasn't just Elena the maid anymore. I was Elena Sterling Martinez, philanthropist, business owner, and the woman who was going to honor her mother's legacy by using her inheritance to change lives. The first item on my agenda was expanding the free clinic program to 5 more hospitals across the city. The second was establishing a scholarship fund for young people aging out of foster care. And the third was creating a job training program that would give people like the person I used to be the skills and opportunities they needed to build better lives. 6 months later, I ran into Isabella at a coffee shop near the hospital where she was completing her volunteer hours. She looked tired and different somehow, like the experiences of the past few months had finally started to teach her some humility. When she saw me, she actually stopped and spoke. Elena, she said quietly, I wanted you to know that I understand now. What I did to you, the way I treated you, it was unforgivable. I'm sorry. It wasn't a perfect apology, and I knew she still had a long way to go. But it was a start, and sometimes that's all you can ask for. Today, the Martinez Foundation has helped thousands of people access healthcare, education, and job training. We've built 3 new free clinics and established scholarship programs at a dozen universities. But more than any of that, we've proven that kindness and compassion are more powerful than cruelty and privilege. My mother always told me that how we treat others when they can't help us is the true measure of our character. I never imagined that lesson would lead me to discovering not just a fortune, but my true purpose in life. Sometimes the universe has a way of balancing the scales, of making sure that those who lift others up are eventually lifted up themselves. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.